I call members to order, and before we move to questions, I call on the First Minister.
So, following the exchange in First Minister's questions last week, I want to apologise to the member for Carmarthen Eastern Dynevor for the answer I gave to him. He will know that we have both received apologies too from the Health Board in relation to the incorrect information on which our exchange was based. I do believe that information was passed to my office in good conscience and was subsequently passed on to me equally in good faith. I should also make clear this was not information personally requested by me in any way, shape or form, but it was information that I chose to use. And on reflection, I don't think that last week was worthy of the exchanges we should promote in this, our Welsh Parliament, and I apologise for my part in that.
Thank you, First Minister's questions. Now to the First Minister, and the first question is from Prif Weinidog. Will the First Minister make a statement on ambulance response times on Ynys Môn?
We expect citizens who have a clinical need for an emergency ambulance response to receive one as quickly as possible whenever required. Despite increased demand in recent months, the Welsh Ambulance Service has continued to meet the target in the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board area.
Thank you for that response. In terms of ambulances in the North West, on Anglesey and the rest of the North West, there is a large sticker which is FAST, which is Stroke Association, encouraging people to phone 999, and the slogan is when strokes strike, act fast. Now, unfortunately, ringing quickly doesn't lead to an ambulance arriving quickly. There's a two recent example, the Port of Holyhead calling for an ambulance for a patient who feared that he'd suffered a stroke, and they eventually had to take the patient themselves to Ysbyty Gwynedd and saw 8 ambulances parked there. Another recent example, an 88-year-old woman, a constituent of mine, was concerned that she'd had a stroke, was waiting 6 hours for an ambulance. She waited another 2 hours outside the hospital once she'd been transferred to A&E. Now, she passed away some hours later. We know that stroke is an amber category call now. Last week, the senior medical officer in North Wales was concerned about that categorisation. Paramedics tell me regularly that they are concerned about categorising stroke calls as amber. So when will the government look at this, because lives truly are at stake?
I have to say that the model itself has been drawn up by clinical professionals. They therefore were considering the way that we should do this. It wasn't something that was done by politicians. It's true to say that 6.5% of red calls in Anglesey were responded to within 8 minutes, but the member has raised 2 issues in this chamber, which of course are very important, and I would ask him to write to me so that I can consider this once again and what happened in those cases.
John Clive. Well, 6 years ago, in fact, in February 2012, it was reported a patient had to wait in an ambulance for more than 7 hours outside Ysbyty Gwynedd because of a hospital bed shortage. Last December, Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board released figures showing that 1,010 patients had faced handovers of more than an hour outside their hospitals in October. Last month, with ambulances queuing outside Ysbyty Gwynedd Accident Emergency Department, we saw coverage of a pensioner waiting 13 hours for an ambulance after her hip gave way. We know that December figures show that 17,400 patients waited more than the 4-hour target time in A&E, with the highest portion, 27%, in Betsy Cadwaladr, and 1,460 waiting longer than 12 hours. When will your government acknowledge that the 30% cut in beds to 10,935 over the last 2 decades has rendered paramedics unable to offload patients quickly, causing ambulances to be delayed and therefore in responses to the next distress call being unable to be responded to promptly, and reverse those bed cuts, not only in the district general hospitals but also in our communities as called for increasingly by our general practitioners?
Well, what I've said, of course, several times in the chamber is it's hugely important to ensure that we have a social care system that can get people out of hospital when it is timely for them to do so. And that is, of course, the reason why we have not cut social care spending in the way that England has. Health and social care run together. What I can say, in terms of emergency calls, in the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board area alone, the ambulance service received 11,232 emergency calls in December 2017, which is an average of 362 calls per day. That's 14% up on the daily average for November 2017 and 9% up on the daily average for December 2016. Despite that rising demand, the national target for red calls was achieved in all 7 health board areas in December, and we of course expect health boards to have plans in place to ensure as smooth a transition and as swift a transition as possible between ambulance and hospital.
Question 9.
Question 2, Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the financial support that has been provided to Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board?
Yes, the Welsh Government revenue allocation to Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board is over £1.3 billion in the current financial year.
Well, I thank the First Minister for that succinct reply. The Health Secretary said recently, in effect, that things have got worse in 2017, 2018 for Betsy Cadwaladr, despite special measures. He said, in particular, it's been disheartening and unacceptable that during 2017-18, issues have escalated in relation to the financial position and some key areas of performance. Betsy Cadwaladr has now been unable to clear its surgery backlog for at least 8 years, and whilst 13 million extra, as announced recently, is very, very welcome, it's clear that maybe up to £50 million is what's needed to bring waiting lists down to within their 36-week target. There's a highly critical report which has been published by Deloitte, much of which has been suppressed by the Health Board and not made available for public reading. In this, it says that the Health Board has limited insight regarding there is limited insight regarding how the Health Board is ultimately going to recover its financial position. Can the First Minister tell us when we will be able to get... Yeah, I will ask us, why is the Welsh Government failing in its duty to the people of North Wales, in providing them the sort of modern health service which a country like Britain ought to deserve?
Well, I'm being lectured by a member of UKIP on proper funding of the health service when his own party leader at one point said there shouldn't be a publicly funded health service at all. And can I say, in terms of answering his question, in terms of answering
I'll have
his...
my apology next week, shall I? Start the question.
Allow the First Minister to continue in his answer, please.
He has made reference to the £13.1 million allocation to Betsy Cadwaladr and the support for developing sustainable unscheduled care, £1.5 million over 2 years. What does that mean? What our expectations are by April 2018, that there should be a reduction of RTT waiting times by around 50% in the numbers waiting over 36 weeks, and progress to continue into 2018 and 19, and financial recovery actions to result in the Health Board meeting the £36 million revised forecast at year end and improving it to 2018 to 19.
Jonathan Saunders.
Diolch Llawyd. Latest data for Betsy Board shows that 9,526 patients requiring treatment have now been waiting over 36 weeks from referral. That figure has more than doubled from when the board was taken into special measures, and 41% of these are orthopaedic and trauma cases. In December, your Cabinet Secretary pledged to halve that number by March this year. And last week, of course, we have the further pledge of immediate action, the allocation of £13.1 million to improve waiting times and £1.5 million for an unscheduled care programme. But he also admitted that mental health care in this board needed urgent attention. As our First Minister, what action will you take to ensure that none of these pledges are broken? And will you also ensure that this latest funding will actually reach the frontline patients and help for positive outcomes within this beleaguered health board?
Well, I think I've given an answer to the previous question in terms of how the money will be spent.
Sir Griffith.
Additional funding to improve waiting times, of course, is very welcome, but it isn't sustainable. Clearly, it doesn't address the underlying capacity issues that we have in the health service in North Wales. Not enough doctors, not enough nurses, and your government clearly not doing enough to get to grips with some of those basic challenges. And what does it say about Labour's running of the National Health Service that 2 years after taking direct control, your government seemingly now has taken Betsy Cadwaladr from special measures into something that looks a bit like extra special measures?
No, it's noticeable we're de-escalating maternity services. It demonstrates what can be achieved with focused action and support. There are still significant challenges that the Health Board faces, and further progress and action is required urgently to transform mental health services. Now, the Cabinet Secretary, along with the Director General, are holding monthly accountability meetings with the Chair and Chief Executive of Betsy Cadwaladr UHB. We'll be setting out a revised framework for Betsy Cadwaladr to cover the next 12 to 18 months with milestones and expectations set out, clearly agreed with HIW, the Wales Audit Office and BCU itself.
Questions now from the party leaders. Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood.
It was right that you today acknowledged the wrongdoing in relation to Adam Price's personal data. We will return to the issue of confidentiality of members' correspondence at another time, but I'll put that to one side for now. I want to ask you about Brexit. The UK government reiterated yesterday that they want us out of the customs union. Now, as well as damaging the Welsh economy, this will affect our open border with Ireland through our ports. A hard border is coming. 6 months ago, the inquiry into the effects of Brexit on Welsh ports made a recommendation for the Welsh Government to set out, and I quote, how it intends to address the lack of physical capacity to accommodate new borders and customs checks at Welsh ports and develop a highways management contingency plan to manage potential congestion resulting from delays in ports. 6 months later, can you tell us what work has been done on that, please?
Well, the issue of physical infrastructure at the ports to deal with issues such as customs are matters for the UK government, not for us. It is for them to spend the money if that kind of Brexit is what they want. However, it's right to say that nobody argues for there to be a hard border between the UK and Republic of Ireland, and we expect the UK government to deliver that. It's not clear how they'll do it, but I expect them to deliver that. It is right to say there are some in the Conservative Party who argue for a hard Brexit. They've been caused to expel them from their own party this morning. In fact, I think that's probably going a little bit too far, even by their Stalinist standards. But the serious point here is this. She and I, have never argued for any kind of Brexit that it even looks like a hard Brexit. There is no mitigating that. There is no making it better. It can only mean things get worse, which is why she and I have always, I believe, been in the same position of saying that Brexit has to work for Wales, that we have to make sure we have full and unfettered access to the single market, and also we should stay in the customs union.
Well, First Minister, that was a specific recommendation to call for action on your government, not on the UK government. I'll move on to the customs union question now. If we're pulled out of the customs union, the UK will have to negotiate its own free trade agreements. Trade deals outside of the EU and the customs union could have a major impact on our economy. I'm sure you'll agree with that. Now, you were asked yesterday if you believed that Wales should have a veto on such trade deals, like the Parliament in Wallonia of Belgium, and in answer to that question, you said no. No, not only to a veto, but no to finding an agreement with the rest of the UK. You said we should be consulted. First Minister, it's your duty to protect the Welsh economy from an extreme Tory Brexit. Why are you against giving this Assembly a say on trade deals?
Well, this is a reserved matter for the UK government, but I do take the view that for any free trade deal to be robust, then it has to have buy-in from all the different nations of the UK. I expect there to be full consultation in order for people to understand what effect a free trade agreement might have. I have never believed that free trade agreements are some kind of panacea. A free trade agreement can work with an economy that is similar to yours, and Europe is a prime example of that, where a free trade deal, enhanced as it is through the customs union, and the single market works well. But I do not believe it's in the interests of Wales to have a free trade agreement, for example, with New Zealand or Australia, that allows the free flow of agricultural produce into Wales. That would destroy Welsh farming. I do not believe that a free trade agreement with any country where steel is produced far more cheaply is in the interest of the Welsh steel industry. And that, I can promise, I will fight tooth and nail.
But asking for consultation is weak. Why don't you go for the strongest option of demanding a veto? First Minister, on October the 17th last year, I proposed that you should have a plan for all Brexit scenarios, including the prospect of leaving the European Union without a deal. You said then, and I quote, and you've just said it again, there is no mitigation for no deal. There is literally nothing we can do in the short term if we find that there is no deal. The External Affairs Committee has published a report saying that the Welsh Government should be preparing for a no-deal scenario. They say governments, national and regional, have preparations in place for such an outcome. Why not Wales? First Minister, those three words sum it up. Why not Wales? There's a strong recommendation for you to start that work and report back in 6 months' time. Have you reviewed that answer you gave me last October? Are you going to draw up a contingency plan for a no-deal scenario, or are you going to leave the fate of Wales in the hands of the hard-right Tories in Westminster?
Well, the UK government itself has no idea how to deal with this. I don't think the Scottish government has a plan in place to deal with a hard Brexit. And as far as we are concerned, well, I think we've got to be careful here, because I don't want to give the impression, nor does she, that somehow a no-deal Brexit is similar to any other kind of Brexit. It isn't. It's far, far worse than that. There is no way of mitigating the effect of a loss of a market to our farmers. There is no way of doing that. There is no market that will replace that. There is no way of mitigating the effect on the aerospace or automotive industry of losing their links with their European operations on the continent. There's no way of doing that. So my argument is not, let's see what we can do to mitigate it. Let's fight it. Let's fight it. Let's fight it tooth and nail. Let's say to the UK government, a hard Brexit, building walls around the UK, turning our backs on our biggest market in Europe is not acceptable to the people of Wales, nor, I believe, to her party, nor mine.
Have a word with the leader then.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew David.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, last week I asked you about the Permanent Secretary's inquiry into media speculation around the reshuffle. When I got back to my office last week, I had a written assembly question come back from you, acknowledging that you do on certain occasions use a private email address to deal with diary issues and clearing urgent press lines. I'd be appreciative to know, were these emails made available to the Permanent Secretary's inquiry, and was this email address used at all to instruct or to brief staff as to press lines in relation to the reshuffle?
No. And the answer to the first question, all relevant evidence was made available to the inquiry.
Well, I'd be grateful if you could be explicit by confirming that your email accounts, your personal email accounts, were made available to the Permanent Secretary's inquiry so that they could have been assessed by the person she appointed, who I believe was the Welsh Government's head of security, I think, undertook the inquiry. Can you confirm that access was given to that individual to your personal email addresses that you do use for government business that you've acknowledged in your written answer to me?
I can't comment on what the evidence looked like. All I can say is that all relevant evidence was submitted to the inquiry.
I have to say, First Minister, I'm deducing that the person who headed up the inquiry did not have access to your emails that you acknowledge that you do use for clearing urgent press lines. Now, people would assume that any activity around a cabinet reshuffle most probably would be urgent press activity, and it's not unreasonable to assume that if there's an inquiry into leaks from government, then all correspondence would have been made available to the person carrying out the inquiry. Why is it so difficult for you to just say yes or no whether that information was given to the individual undertaking the inquiry? I would be grateful for clarity, crystal clear clarity, as to whether the inspector did have the ability to look into your emails, and if he didn't, will you be making those emails available so that they can, on merit, decide whether they want to inquire more into these matters?
Well, firstly, it is a matter for the head of security to decide what he regards as relevant evidence. Secondly, any email that is sent to me, to my personal email, which in any event is only accessed from a government machine, is recorded. Any email is recorded in that fashion. So we know from the Gove judgment that any email that's sent to a government machine is subject to a freedom of information request anyway, and that is something that I know. But as I say, all relevant information was provided to the inquiry.
So you have made it available.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP.
Leader of the UKIP Group, Neil Hamilton.
I'd like to follow up the last question, which was asked by the Leader of Plaid Cymru a moment ago. She referred to this excellent report from the External Affairs Committee on how is the Welsh Government preparing for Brexit. And in the Chairman's introduction to the report, as she said, there is a need for the Welsh Government to be doing more in terms of scenario planning, including a no deal to prepare for Wales, that governments, national, regional, or elsewhere in the EU and the European Commission itself have preparations in place for such an outcome. Why not Wales? If they can do it, why can't the Welsh Government?
Well, I have to say, the leader of UKIP comes from a position of saying it doesn't matter if there's a hard Brexit. These things are not important. Tariffs, non-tariff barriers are not important. He suffers from the same misguided view as the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, namely that these things are not important. Well, they are important for Welsh farmers because the Welsh Conservatives have never said how they will protect Welsh farmers if there are tariffs placed on their produce sent to the European Union. They have never said how the markets of the food and drink industry, 90% of which are exported to the European single market, how they will be protected. Our position is based on evidence that has been produced, for example, by Cardiff Business School and others, and not on wishful thinking.
But the First Minister is still fighting the referendum campaign. My question was a practical one, that other governments and regional assemblies are doing something to prepare for the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. That will not come about, if it comes about at all, because of what the UK government wants. It will come about because the EU will irrationally decide to cut off its nose to spite its face. But the question I asked was a simple one. If there's a no-deal Brexit, obviously there will be certain consequences which would differ from doing a deal of some kind, depending on the nature of that deal. There will always be problems of transition on leaving the EU, just as there were problems of transition, as I remember very well, when we joined the EU. So it's not that it doesn't matter at all, it's just that in the long term economies adjust. I revert to my question, though. If other assemblies of this kind and governments throughout the rest of the European Union, if his members will stop chuntering, and the chunter-in-chief in particular over there, then perhaps I can get my question. I'm sorry to be doing your job,
yeah.
Chloe, I didn't mean to.
No, you carry on with your job, which is asking the question.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Why is the Welsh Government not doing anything at all, so far as I can tell, to prepare for the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, to help Welsh businesses to cope with the transition period that is inevitable, whatever the outcome?
There it is. The word cope is used. Cope. That's the whole point. A hard Brexit is a disaster. 60% of our exports go to that single market. 90% of our food and drink exports go to the single market. The parties have the right to try to ignore that. It doesn't matter. Wishful thinking. We'll find other markets. There is no evidence of that. And why on earth should businesses have to pay a price for what he said and his party said to the electorate? Why should they have to cope? Why can't they prosper? And businesses will prosper if we remain inside the single market and the customs union.
The First Minister talks in terms of that there is a world of certainty that we're in at the minute, and we're about to go into a world of uncertainty. Anybody who's ever run a business, and I know the First Minister hasn't, knows that you have to cope with changed circumstances. You know, Sir James Dyson, who runs one of our biggest companies, has said that uncertainty is an opportunity, and the opportunity actually is that the rest of the world is growing at a far greater rate than Europe. So the opportunity is to export to the rest of the world and to capitalise upon that. What is the Welsh Government doing to prepare for the possibility of opening up other markets around the world where the EC Commission itself says that 90% of growth in demand is going to come in future years?
Still want to be part of a common front with him and his party? And that's one of the questions that perhaps people want to ask. Of course not, given what he has just said. Well, can I invite him to do something? He is a leader of a political party in Wales. Come to a farm, a hill farm, anywhere in Wales, a sheep farm. The leader of the Welsh Conservatives can join him, actually, get away from the Vale and his acres in the Vale, and go and talk to the farmers there, the sheep farmers, and say to them, uncertainty is an opportunity. Say that to them. I offer him the invitation. He can be joined by his political bedfellow over there. Go and talk to them and tell them they're worrying about nothing, moaning about nothing, and that, in fact, a reduction in their subsidies and the loss of their market is actually an opportunity.
Question 3, Caroline Jones.
Will the First Minister outline how the Invest to Save Fund is benefiting South Wales West?
Yes, since 2009 we have invested nearly £175 million in a wide range of projects across Wales, including over £12 million, I beg your pardon, in the South Wales West region.
First Minister, while there have been good examples of the scheme being used to improve the lives of constituents of my region, such as funding for additional foster carers in Neath Port Talbot or a support worker for looked after children in Swansea, the biggest investment of nearly £1.5 million was used to improve the offices of Bridgend Council. Surely the scheme should prioritise areas that are suffering as a result of council cutbacks. Swansea Council has a £56 million backlog of road repairs. It is believed that insurance payouts and compensation claims will skyrocket as a result of the repair backlog. Therefore, investing in repairs now will save more money in the longer term. First Minister, what consideration have you given to allowing the scheme to be used to make vital repairs that truly benefit the public rather than those that benefit elected councillors?
Well, let's have a look at some of the investments made that benefit elected councillors. £2.2 million recently awarded to ABMU, which includes £769,000 for modernising the patient record system so that records can be located and are available, £400,000 for reducing sickness levels in the board, £441,000 for a primary care out-of-hours service. Now, that doesn't seem to me like helping councillors. £500,000 to the mental health charity Haval, and that's supported the development of a specialist mental health rehab facility, the first of its kind in the UK, that benefits the public. £3 million to the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, and £108,000 to Swansea Council Social Services to work with young people to break the cycle of ex-looked-after children entering care themselves. This is a way in which public money makes a difference, and I'm surprised that UKIP can't bring themselves to praise that.
David Rees.
First Minister, as you've already pointed out, the investor saving now, my area, South Wales West, has actually also been focused on the health services, and ABMU has received money for the new record system, also money for Academy for the out-of-hours services to improve that, and also for medicine, relooking at the governance of medicine, the management of medicines. It's that type of investment which is improving efficiency and therefore delivering services, better services for my constituents. Do you agree with me that we need to do more of this to ensure that patients can get better services out of ABMU because they're improving productivity and efficiency?
Well, this is why, of course, the money was made available to ABMU in order to make sure that those obstacles that might exist within the system are removed, making it better for the people who work there and, of course, particularly for patients.
Question 4,
Question 4, Angela Byrne.
Good afternoon, First Minister. What discussions has the Welsh Government had with the public sector bodies to improve the handling of historical sex abuse cases?
Well, lessons from the Waterhouse inquiry have been taken forward with Welsh public bodies. Safeguarding arrangements have been strengthened through legislation, including a new duty to report and a National Independent Safeguarding Board, and a multi-agency Welsh reference group has been established in partnership with the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse.
Thank you, First Minister. I do appreciate the devolved limitations surrounding this question, but in my role as an Assembly constituency member, I am currently dealing with a number of cases of historical sex abuse, and I am having to talk to, on a regular basis, some very, very hurt and traumatised people. On a number of occasions, there appears to be an absolute marked reluctance by the Crown Prosecution Service to take a prosecution forward, despite good and corroborated evidence, either because of changes in the law within the intervening years. If you're talking about something, say, 30 years ago, the age of being able to be tried for example, for a crime has obviously changed, I think in 1985 or 87, or because of in their view, it's not in the public interest. But of course, it is in the interests of those who've been affected. I have one case where the claimants in the end took their case themselves to the High Court and won, and had an improvement in the prosecution or in the judgment. Is there anything the Welsh Government can do to act as a check and balance on the decisions of the CPS and of the police in order to ensure that we are doing justice as well as talking about justice and trying to be seen to be having justice?
Directly, of course, these bodies are not devolved. Our view is they should be, but they're not, and that's for a different time. But she's absolutely correct to ask, what then have we done as a government in terms of echoing her concerns? Well, obviously, we have expressed our abhorrence that the survivors in this case didn't receive the response that was owed to them. We have introduced a duty to report children at risk and a duty to report adults at risk to ensure that concerns about the abuse of people are reported and can be properly investigated. I know that the Minister for Children and Social Care has contacted the Mid and West Wales Regional Safeguarding Children Board to request an update on actions being taken to address concerns which have been raised about the current safeguarding arrangements. Dyfed-Powys Police and Pembrokeshire, I understand, have met with representatives of Caldy Island because there is a need to strengthen their arrangements. And I hear what the member says, and of course I don't dispute that. And the Minister for Children and Social Care also wrote to the Catholic Safeguarding Advice Service to seek assurances they're taking action in relation to current concerns. It's not isolated, I understand that. Caldy Island, of course, has been the incidents that has been most in the news, but I hope I've given us some comfort there. But what we have done as a government, given our devolved responsibilities, to ensure that this situation does not happen again.
Bethan Jenkins.
Well, historic sexual abuse doesn't become historical if we deal with it in the here and now. We know that there is an investigation by by Health Inspectorate Wales as a result of the Chris Wade allegations, but it had to take significant public and political pressure for the Cabinet Secretary for Health to initiate that particular Health Inspectorate Wales report. I was shocked that it didn't come from Health Inspectorate Wales themselves, that they would take a more proactive role in seeing where there are allegations of abuse, and for them, therefore, to carry forth those particular reports. What are you doing as a government to ensure that there are uniform complaints procedures, that people feel confident that they can come forward with these allegations, so that we don't have these problems in the future where people are having to go back in time, as Angela Byrne said, talking about public interest, talking about what's relevant in the here and now, when to those people who have been abused, it is very important for them to get answers to those questions.
The member raises a very distressing case, which I'm also familiar with. If I could write to her, giving her more detail in terms of the answer that she seeks, because it is important, of course, that the complaint system is as streamlined as possible and that nothing falls through the gaps. So I will write to her with an answer, a detailed answer to her question.
Question 5, Jane.
Question 5, Jane Bryant.
Minister make a statement on cervical screening in Wales.
Well, cervical screening can save lives, and we want to maximise uptake. 77% of eligible women in Wales regularly attend for cervical screening. And from October 2018, we will be introducing a more sensitive primary test, allowing us more effectively to more effectively identify women requiring treatment, reducing the need for repeat smears.
Thank you, First Minister. Despite letters sent to all eligible women in Wales for cervical screening, recent figures suggest that there has been a decrease in participation. Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust found that the numbers of women attending screening in Wales is at a 10-year low. In particular, the charity highlighted concerns about the number of women aged between 25 and 29 participating in screening. With cervical screening found to prevent 70% of cervical cancers from developing, what more can the Welsh Government do to promote and encourage women to have a potentially life-saving test?
Well, from October of this year, Cervical Screening Wales will be introducing Hpv testing, and that represents a completely new approach to cervical screening. It is a more sensitive test, which will allow us to more effectively identify those women requiring treatment. As I said, we know that coverage in general is falling across the UK nations, and there is work to be done in order to maintain and improve participation rates in Wales. Public Health Wales Screening for Life campaign runs each July to raise awareness of access to cervical screening in community groups that have an inherently low take-up, and it encourages eligible individuals to attend for screening when invited. Through these things, we want to make sure that the trend where we see fewer people having the test is reversed in the near future.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, research has shown that the women from Black, Asian and ethnic minority background are less likely to attend cervical screening than white women. A survey found that only 28% of women from ethnic minority communities would be comfortable talking to a male GP about cervical screening compared to 45% of white women. Twice as many BAME women as white women said better knowledge about the tests and its importance would be encourage them to attend. First Minister, what is the Welsh Government doing to increase awareness of cervical screening among women from our ethnic minorities communities in Wales, please?
Well, I refer the member to the answer I just gave in terms of the Screening for Life campaign, which is aimed at ensuring that community groups that have an inherently low take-up of screening, to ensure that take-up improves in the future.
Cwestiwn 6, Gareth.
Question 6, Gareth Bennett.
Llywydd. What assessment has the Welsh Government made of planning consent and change of use in relation to pubs in Wales?
Well, we do recognise the important contribution pubs make to communities. We are working with community groups and other representatives, including the campaign for Real Ale. I declare an interest as a member on how best to protect premises and facilities that help bring people together. I've always said that a community without a pub is a collection of houses, quite often, and I've seen this happen in my part of the world. We will be consulting on a review of the town and country planning use classes order in May, with a view to looking at how we can better protect our pubs.
Thanks for that response. Yes, you mentioned on a previous occasion that you were a member of CAMRA, and it's good that you're involved in the Real Ale sphere. We are trying to. We've got a cross-party group now. Nick's involved in it as well. Simon Thomas is running it. We're going to hopefully help you to push this forward, because we have been waiting rather a long time for a statement on this. I know I don't want to anticipate what your review is going to come up with, but we do have they do have the Localism Act in England now, so that does give some protection to pubs as assets of community value. Might that be the direction that you could be thinking about going down in Wales?
Well, we have been working with CAMRA, and that work has been helpful to explore the implications of splitting the A3 food and drink use class, and we will look at how that might work. We're also considering the recommendations made by the University of the West of England in terms of the operation of the use classes order, and I mentioned how the consultation will proceed in that regard. It is true to say that for some pubs the business is no longer viable, but there are many pubs that I know of where it was a perfectly viable business, but there was more money to be made by turning those pubs into flats. And that is what we have to guard against in the future, because pubs are hugely important assets to our towns and villages and communities across Wales, and we want to make sure that we can do all that we can to protect those that are viable and provide such a service to locals.
Nick Ramsey.
I've also been involved in the CAMRA sphere over the years, First Minister, so we have something in common that we can talk about over a pint sometime. I agree with the sentiments that Gareth Bennett mentioned. There was a CAMRA event held at the Assembly last week. I'm pleased to see the cross-party group on beer and the pub being re-established. There are many issues facing pubs across Wales, and you're right to say in your answer, First Minister, that pubs aren't just pubs. They are, for many of our rural communities, particularly the heart of our communities, and when you lose the pub, you lose the hub of the local community. At the CAMRA event, we heard that many pubs in Wales are closing a week, and across the border in England, planning law has been changed to make change of use more difficult. Are you looking to follow through with similar changes here? I hear what you're saying about bringing an order forward later in the year. Will you be looking at restricting planning law so that it's much more difficult to change a pub, particularly in a rural area, into another use?
All options are open in terms of how that's done. We want to find the most effective way of doing it in order to make sure that our pubs are protected.
Question 7, Jonathan Saunders.
Question 7, Jonathan Saunders.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the financial performance of town and community councils, please?
Yes, I welcome the Auditor General for Wales's most recent assessment that progress has been made in improving financial performance, but the town and community councils still need to do more to ensure they have robust accountability arrangements in place.
Thank you, First Minister. I'm glad that you've read the report. But as you've rightly pointed out, the Auditor General has raised several concerns. One thing in particular, though, local council reserves currently stand at £41.5 million, and this is money that taxpayers have paid through a council precept to provide services for them. He also noted that community councils in Wales are receiving avoidable qualified audit opinions, over 170, and 81 councils failed to comply with the statutory timetable for publishing their accounts, and 174 submitted incomplete returns. Now, I know there's an ongoing community council review cross-party, and I know I was working with the previous Cabinet Secretary on that. The consultation process, though, is extremely vague, and it doesn't seek to address the fundamental issues of financial probity and auditable accountability, which the Auditor General feels the need to raise year on year. Will you work with your Cabinet Secretary in order to address the failings of this particular level of democratic governance?
Well, I think we should be careful not to attribute failings to every town and community council. We know that there are some that have struggled. We know there are some that are very small, very, very small, and sometimes it's difficult to see how they manage from time to time. They seem to. In terms of the review panel, well, just to be clear, the remit of that panel is to explore the potential role of local government below local authority councils, drawing on best practice, to define the most appropriate models or structures to deliver this role, and to consider how those models and structures should be applied across Wales. Now, as part of that, of course, financial sustainability is an important factor. The panel is currently gathering evidence and seeking views from community councils, yes, but also the communities that they serve and the people that they work with, and indeed the panel have already taken evidence from the Wales Audit Office.
David Rowlands.
First Minister, we often hear the word austerity used in this chamber. So given the limited size of many of our local authorities, how can the money spent on community councils be justified, in that it requires the expense of a chief executive, several staff and a number of office buildings to facilitate their operations? In other words, First Minister, what do community councils offer that the local government couldn't implement themselves?
I'm not aware of any town or community councils that have a chief executive, I must say. I'm aware of those that have clerks, and some are full-time and some are part-time. I think that town and community councils are an extremely valuable level of government. If the member is suggesting we should abolish, for example, Bridgend Town Council or Porthcawl Town Council, then he is welcome to explain that on T20, apart from the Rhondda, of course, where there are no community councils. He is welcome to come and explain that to them. But no, what is important is not that we abolish an entire level of local government, but look to find ways to strengthen that level in the future.
Question 8, Joyce.
Question 8, Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Clywyd. What is the Welsh Government doing to promote tourism in Mid and West Wales?
Well, our tourism strategy sets out our priorities to support the tourism industry right across Wales. That includes marketing campaigns in the UK and overseas, capital development funding for new and existing tourism businesses, along with revenue funding for regional products.
I thank you very much for your answer, First Minister, but Wales is home to some incredible wildlife, like the iconic bottlenose dolphin in Cardigan Bay, red kites in Powys and other areas, and ospreys in Montgomeryshire. And we are lucky enough to have some fantastic nature reserves like Llanelli Fowl and Wetland Centre, Scomer Island and the W Osprey Centre, and many more besides. I think that when wildlife centres and wildlife tourism are put together and run very well, they offer a real opportunity to the visitor to enhance that local community and to spend their money very, very locally without harming or doing any harm whatsoever to the environment that they are enjoying. So I ask you, First Minister, what steps the Welsh Government is taking to promote sustainable wildlife tourism in Wales?
Yes, I mean, in 2013 to 14, funding was awarded to Wildlife Trusts Wales for an interactive wildlife brochure. £15,000 was awarded to the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales for Wild Wales Adventure in 2015. 2016 to 17, £30,000 was awarded to the Wildlife Trusts of South and West Wales for Wild Wales Adventures and Legends, and £100,000 has been awarded for 2017 to 19, also to the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales for Sea Wild Wales Lonely Planet projects. There are 4 examples there of the support the government has given in order to promote our wonderful natural heritage.
Question now.
Question 9, Susie David.
Will the First Minister make a statement on transport provision in South Wales West?
Yes, our recently published update of the National Transport Finance Plan sets out the delivery of an ambitious programme of road, rail, bus and active travel improvements for the next 3 years, and that will help to ensure South Wales West is connected via an accessible, affordable, reliable and fully integrated public transport system.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. You may know that additional events in Swansea and Carmarthen have just been added to the consultation programme for the GW franchise, Great Western franchise. And I hope that constituents in South Wales West will take this opportunity to press the case for a Swansea Parkway station to the northwest of the city. Given the cross-party interest in a Swansea West Metro, if I can call it that, and of course your government's commitment to the concept of that, can you tell me what money Welsh Government has already committed or spent on further feasibility and scoping perhaps beyond the original ideas of Professor Barry?
Well, we have funded the initial concept development work for the Swansea Bay Metro from the Local Transport Fund. That phase of development work will be completed by the end of next month. We have allocated £4,378,940 from the Local Transport Fund in 2017 to 18 for the Swansea Bay City region. In addition to the Metro concept work, we know that there are schemes in Swansea such as the Baldwins Bridge Interchange, the Kingsbridge Active Travel Plan that are examples of where transport improvements are being made. Swansea Parkway Station would sit on the Swansea District Line, which I suspect would need some upgrading. It carries occasional passenger services at the moment. It's mainly a freight line, but nevertheless would serve a substantial area of the northern part of Swansea and the lower part of the Swansea Valley, in the same way that Bristol Parkway serves a particular end of Bristol compared to Bristol Temple-Meath.
Question 10,
Question 10, Lloyd. Thank you. Will the First Minister make a statement on local government support services for elderly people?
Social care is an area of national importance, and the Welsh Government has prioritised funding for older people, fully recognising locally provided social care services are a lifeline in supporting older people in Wales.
Thank you very much for that response, First Minister. Perhaps you will be aware of a proposal by Swansea Council to charge £40 a day for elderly people who attend day centres that are supported by the Council. This is a service that's available free of charge at the moment. These day centres offer considerable support to the users and are of great help in tackling loneliness and isolation in the city. Therefore, do you share my concerns that introducing a daily charge of £40 risks causing more loneliness, and does your Government agree that there's a need to review day centre fees to ensure that these centres are accessible and tackle loneliness amongst our elderly people?
Well, this consultation is something for Swansea Council and for them to proceed with and to come to a decision on, but it's crucially important that we ensure that nobody loses out because of any changes ultimately, if that is the decision taken. And finally, question 11, Hefin David.
Statement on the impact that the exit in the European Union will have on the pharmaceutical industry in Wales.
Well, yes, the pharmaceutical industry depends on integrated international supply chains and pan-European regulation through the European Medicines Agency. There is a risk of serious damage to the UK industry if the UK government maintains its red lines in terms of leaving the single market, the customs union and the EU regulatory systems.
Would you therefore agree that the pharmaceutical industry in particular needs a special trade deal, as it's an industry with a fast decaying supply chains and short product-to-market turnaround times, and that the consequences of not recognising that will be dire for skills, jobs and pharmaceutical research in Wales?
Yes, it would, but in common with many other sectors, that would be true. Rather than have a trade deal for one sector, I'd like to see a comprehensive arrangement whereby we remain within the single market, negating the need for a trade deal with our European partners, and also, of course, within the customs union. All the evidence that has been published so far, even by the UK government, suggests that is actually the most sensible outcome. Those who do not agree with empirical research are trying to suggest that that research is wrong.
Diolch i'r Prif.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is the business.